Expand your mind and enrich your world. It's time for another outstanding podcast from ICRT.
Hello and welcome to another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. I'm Keith Menconi. Taiwan's migrant domestic workers are set to get a long-awaited pay raise. The decision by Taiwan's government to increase monthly wages follows intense pressure from the countries of origin for this group of workers, especially Indonesia and the Philippines. Today on the show, we're going to be hearing from Taoyuan-based NGO Vietnamese Migrant Workers and Brides, an immigrant rights advocacy group that has been lobbying for increased wages for these workers here in Taiwan. So we're going to be getting their take on this news, and here today to give us that take is the group's founder and head, Peter Nguyen Van Hong. Father Nguyen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Keith, for having me.
So just to give our listeners a sense of what has actually changed here, we're talking about domestic migrant workers. So these are workers that come into the homes of Taiwanese families and provide care largely for the elderly. And for the last 18 years, their wages haven't changed for the last 18 years. It was set at just a little under 16,000 NT a month. It's now been raised to 17,000, so a little more than 1,000 NT a month increase. But the national minimum wage is 20,000, so it's still not quite as high as the minimum wage enjoyed by Taiwanese citizens and also other migrant groups. This is a specific migrant group that is treated a little bit differently, and we'll talk about that in a second. But before we get there, I just want to get your general reaction to this news. Is this something that your group is celebrating?
For me, I don't celebrate this change after hearing this news. The reasons are this group of workers are not, again, protected by the labor standard law. Secondly, they are not fully enjoy the rights of having paid full salary rise as other group of migrant workers. Thirdly, these migrant workers themselves, they cannot enjoy the rights of being protected by the law. And the fourth one is that they themselves, they are not protected, they are not given the labor insurance like other group of migrant workers. Therefore, when the money, when their basic salaries increase from 15,840 to 17,000, their rights is still not fully protected.
All right, so a lot of issues to think about there, a lot to unpack. But before we start doing that unpacking, first, for our listeners that haven't really been following this news very closely, I was wondering if you could help us understand who this group is. So these migrant domestic workers, they're largely from South and Southeast Asia, largely women. What can you tell us about them?
Well, as you just said, the workers who work in this industry are coming from Southeast countries like Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia. So this group of people, not only until now female, they are also male working in this industry as well. When they come to Taiwan, they themselves not only caring for the elderly, they work as a maid in the house, and sometimes they are taken to work in the employer's relatives' houses. So that it's very rarely to see migrant workers working in this industry and only caring for the elderly. So that meaning that the working hours are more than prescribed in the contract. And then these workers themselves, when they are under that kind of condition, they themselves, because of language limitation, because of their limitation of understanding the law, and then they don't have many friends here to help them when they're in trouble, and therefore these people, they live in fear. And then when they encounter difficulties in their work, and and it is very, very difficult for them to find people to help them, even though the government here has the line 1955 to help them, but from our own experience, it's not that effective. Therefore, I think that increasing the salary from 15,840 to 17,000 doesn't solve the problem of injustice imposing on these people.
Right. So there's a lot of issues beyond the wage issue that these workers face. And I want to hit one of the points that you just made even a little bit harder. So you're saying that these domestic migrant workers actually fall under a different set of regulations from migrant laborers that come to Taiwan.
That's correct. And because these people are protected by the labor standard law, meaning that these workers are protected, their rights are protected like Taiwanese workers. But for the people who work in the domestic industry, in the household or caretakers, they are not protected by the law.
All right. Well, one issue that does actually affect all migrants coming to Taiwan is the issue of broker fees. A lot of media points out that to get to Taiwan, these migrants generally are relying on brokers, on middlemen that these migrants hire to set them up, get them over to Taiwan, and then set them up with a job. And sometimes the fees for doing this are quite high. And so these migrants end up with large loans. They have to spend a large portion of their income paying back these brokers for their services. And so they're kind of in a bad situation here in Taiwan right off the bat. Now, what we're talking about here is a wage increase. So wouldn't this increase, at least, looking on the positive side, wouldn't this wage increase go a little bit of the ways towards addressing at least this issue?
Regarding the amount of money that the caretaker receives with the new change, I asked many migrant workers, and they seem to satisfy with this kind of change. However, they would tell me that why there are the difference between us and people who come here to work in other industries. So I think that having a little bit more money, that of course will help them to solve their own problem a little bit better. So I think that the positive side of it is that there is something changed. However, I would like to use this opportunity to ask any officers of the labor department or government officers that when you listen to this program, I would like to ask you to go further, to recognize that these people are workers coming here to work. Therefore, they have to be protected by the very basic labor standard law here in this country. And then when Taiwan is able to do that, and then it is living out its responsibility and obligation to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because making the different distinction between domestic migrant workers and the migrant workers working in other industry, they are publicly saying that we have two systems of caring for the migrant worker in this country. And then, the one system is that the worker themselves fully enjoy their rights, and the other system, other workers themselves they don't. And I think that is not the right thing to do. And if Taiwan want to tell the world that we are respecting the worker rights, and that is the human rights, and then this is what we are doing.
So from your perspective, I mean, obviously, you can't speak for the government and you can't speak for the families, the employers that are hiring these domestic workers. But from your perspective, what do you think is making it difficult to get these migrant domestic workers covered by the same laws as other laborers in Taiwan? What do you think is making the government reluctant to take that step?
You know that in my time of working here in Taiwan, I have involved in many discussions and many meetings between NGO and the government. we propose a law we call that the Household Service Act. Many years ago, and we have a good number of legislators supported us in the legislation in the legislative Nguyen. However, we couldn't pass it, the law, because it doesn't get the support from the Labor Department and then other legislator. So you know that the issue here is about justice for everybody who come here to work as migrant workers. And the reason why Taiwan government don't want to do that, I think it's very political. The presidential election is coming, and then other election, legislative election, and these migrant workers themselves, they have no right to vote. And then because they have no right to vote, therefore, politicians themselves, they don't pay attention to the rights of migrant workers, and therefore they ignore this issue. And now raising the money for the caretaker might affect the way that the employer react to this change, and then they might not vote for the government. And I think that is make it short. These people don't have voice in this society, and therefore they are ignored, by the government itself.
And so what do you think it would take for Taiwan to start moving in the direction that you want to see?
Okay. Now we're talking about the whole picture of migrant workers, not a caretaker anymore. Now, I think for me, the right direction that Taiwan government need to take the broker system out of the context of employing migrant workers to work in Taiwan.
So you really feel like that's the root cause here?
Yep, the root cause of it. So that there would be direct employment between country to country. And then when this direct hiring system operates, and then the worker themselves will not be under a heavy burden of the broker fees in their own country. And when the worker themselves are free from this burden, and then they will, psychologically or mentally, they are more relaxed to work in this country and then to earn money. So that is the first thing. The second thing, for the caretaker system, I think the government of Taiwan need to abolish the hiring, the providing migrant workers to work in the family to care for elderly. However, what they need is to go to the long-term care system, where the migrant workers becomes a force of working with other Taiwanese people who provide care for the elderly in Taiwan.
So it sounds like what you're saying is we need to move towards a system that doesn't take place entirely inside the homes of Taiwanese families. Basically, it's just too difficult to regulate the system when it's happening inside people's homes.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Yes, and it's very difficult to check it. In my office, I have I have encountered a very tragic experience that happened about 20 years ago, where I asked more than 100 Vietnamese female workers who had been raped by the brokers in Taiwan for the duration of 3 years. A house, when a worker who are sent to a house to work in this house, as soon as the door is closed, we don't know what happened inside. And then when something happened inside, and the people and the workers themselves, they are living in fear, and they work in fear because of the burden imposed on them from the broker fees and the language difficulty and the law and the context. And these people dare not to talk about it because they are afraid of being a repatriation. Therefore, I think that what you just said, that's correct. Yeah, it's very difficult to regulate it. And so why not to change up this kind of system?
All right. Well, a lot for us to think about and a lot for us to keep our eyes on as this continues to unfold. We have been speaking to Peter Nguyen Van Hong of Taoyuan-based NGO, Vietnamese Migrant Workers and Brides. Peter, thank you so much for joining us once again on the program.
Thank you very much, Keith, and thank you for listening to my interview, and wish you all the best, and God bless.
And that is it for this podcast edition of Taiwan Talk. Don't forget to rate and review the show on iTunes. For ICRT, I'm Keith Manconi.